Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help. And King of Floors, your vinyl, laminate, and engineered flooring superstore.
All of our guests today, Tuesday, are sponsored by Skipper Auto, supporting Canadian fishing families through a revolutionary seafood buying experience. Check them out online at skipperauto.com. Just before the NHL trade deadline yesterday, the Canucks pick up two Blackhawks, or I guess former Blackhawks, and Matthew Highmore and Madison Bowie here to talk about that and about Adam Gadette. From the Chicago Sun-Times, he covers the Blackhawks, Ben Pope. Ben, thanks for doing this. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Recovering from a busy day yesterday. How are you?
I bet. You had very well, thank you. You had a real, well, it's an interesting combination, but for a lot of people, a bad combination. You had to, a difficult combination. You had to cover the trade deadline, then the Hawks had a game last night.
Yeah, it was a long day, and I know Jeremy Colleton talked about how it was tough after the emotional impact of trading away so many guys to have to get back up for that game. And I feel like there's been some talk that maybe the NHL shouldn't play games on trade deadline day, and I kind of feel like yesterday was maybe a good example of why. So maybe we'll see that in the future.
Before we get to Highmore and Bowie, Ben, what's the general consensus on the job Stan Bowman did leading up to the deadline? He's got himself 8 draft picks, if I'm not mistaken, at the 2021 draft.
Yeah, I think he did a really good job, honestly. I know a lot of fans are tough on him, and media are too, but I think everyone's pretty impressed and satisfied with the trades. He was certainly very active. The Hawks are the most active team in the league. They made 6 trades in the 2 weeks leading up to the deadline, including 4 yesterday, and they were all along the same mentality of sort of translating current players, a couple expiring free agents, and some other expendable guys to try to get picks and prospects and continue to build up the franchise for the future. And I think Bowman did a really good job with that. The Janmark trade to Vegas in particular to get a second and third round picks back for him was well above expectations. So pretty satisfied with what he did, and it seems like it should help the franchise down the road.
All right, Ben, what are the Canucks getting in Matthew Highmore first and Madison Bowie?
Yeah, Highmore broke into the league last year. He was pretty much a regular in the Hawks lineup after spending a couple years in the AHL. And then this year has been a little bit in and out. He's been a healthy scratch more than not over the past month especially. But he's a hard-working guy. Colleton talked at length yesterday about his team-first mentality and how he really fills his role as a fourth-line grinder well and knows what he's expected to do. He's not going to bring a lot of offense. He's responsible defensively, but I wouldn't call him a shutdown guy either. He's the kind of guy that's not exactly unique in the NHL, not exactly hard to come by, but he knows what he's supposed to do, and he does fill that role well, and he fits in well to a locker room. So the Canucks aren't getting anything especially notable in him, but they'll get someone who can contribute in a lower forward role.
And Madison Bowie.
Yeah, well, Bowie was brought in January. The Hawks had lost a couple defensemen, and they had some expansion draft concerns, making sure they'd have someone meeting the games played requirement to be eligible to be exposed. So that's essentially why they signed him and why they signed him to a 2-year contract, because he would also have to be under contract the next year. He only played 2 games for the Hawks, and he was pretty much on the taxi squad the rest of the time. So he really wasn't figuring in much to the actual on-ice play. He was more just there for sort of logistical purposes. But Colleton talked yesterday about how he never complained about the situation and was a good teammate despite being a scratch pretty much every game. And that's what you like to see. I know he has more NHL experience in the past with Detroit and Washington. So maybe if he is in the lineup for the Canucks, he can sort of draw back on his time from those spots.
Hey, Ben, I want to ask you about Brent Seabrook. A little while back, he announced his retirement. Local kid here, South Delta, Tawasin, and what he meant to the Chicago Blackhawks after all these years. He was a big part of their Stanley Cups. Talk a little bit about his retirement and what he meant to the city of Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the biggest moments of this season for sure. He'd obviously gone through a lot physically. He had 3 surgeries last year, and then so it sort of flared up. He said that in December he was, getting ready for training camp, thought he'd be ready to play, and then he woke up one morning around Christmas and just couldn't really move. And he had tried to get back in shape, tried to sort of revive his career this spring, and wasn't able to do so, and eventually decided that it was time to retire. But he certainly meant so much. Big part of all 3 Stanley Cup runs. Was a first pairing defenseman on all those teams, and had really, selflessly ground through so much ups and downs in his career and so much physical endurance to last as long as he did. Certainly, Hawks fans love him, and that was an emotional day when he decided to retire.
The other BC boy there, Duncan Keith, how much does he have left in the tank, Ben? He just keeps skating like he's 19, 20 years old.
Yeah, in terms of his physical endurance, it's crazy. He's 38 now, 37 maybe, and he's still playing 20 minutes or more a night. Last night the Hawks went down to 5 defensemen early, and Keith played I think like 29-40 or something, so almost half the entire game. So pretty insane to see him still be able to handle that kind of workload at his age. I think he's showing signs of slowing down maybe a little bit this year. He's been a little bit more mistake prone, a little bit more likely to be out of position this season. And Connor Murphy has really taken over as the team's number 1 defenseman, especially in situations where they're protecting a lead, whereas for the past decade it's been Keith as the number 1 guy. But he's still a really important part of the team, still one of the top 2 or 3 defensemen on this team, and still a guy they really rely on the ice and obviously for leadership. So it seems like he probably has at least another year or 2 left in him.
We're talking with Ben Pope of the Chicago Sun-Times. Let's get back to yesterday. Ben, what do the Hawks like about Adam Gadette?
Yeah, well, I think the idea behind that Highmore for Gadette trade is that Gadette's a year younger. He has certainly more offensive upside. As you guys saw, he scored, I think, 33 points last year, and Highmore has only scored 10 in his entire NHL career. And I think they also like that he's a right-handed center. Other than Kirby Dach, the Hawks have entirely left-handed centers. So that's kind of an area that they needed to bulk up in. And especially with getting rid of Carl Soderberg, they needed to replenish that at the center position. I would say, as you guys probably know, he's maybe a little bit more inconsistent than the average player. That's a concern for him. And his health has, I know, been a little bit of an issue too. But I think the Hawks think he has higher upside than Highmore, and they have a few guys in the AHL that could fill Highmore's position if Gadette doesn't click with the Hawks. So the idea is that they'll take the gamble on him, and maybe he'll turn into, an impactful offensively upsided, 3rd line, 4th line center.
And Ben, before we let you go, any update on Jonathan Toews' health?
Yeah, we still haven't heard anything there. He's made a few appearances, and it sounds like, he's doing okay, but we still don't really know when he'll return to the team.
What's the speculation on him, Ben?
Well, there's been rampant rumors about all sorts of, crazy health scenarios that could be, but it's hard to really comment exactly on what it is because the Hawks as an organization and my sources have been so quiet about it, just protecting his privacy. But Bowman, the GM here, has been a little bit more open the past month or so, just being willing to give an update, and he still insists that the Hawks see him factoring in and being part of the team in future seasons. They're still sort of penciling him into the lineup for next year and beyond. So it's hard to know exactly what's going on, but it could be worse, I guess.
Ben, thanks for this. Appreciate it. All the best.
Yeah, thanks for having me.